Mumford & Sons, that's good walk-on music.
There we go. We're good.
So I do want to get to Intel, but before that, I want to go even further back to introduce you to this audience. You're from a farming family in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Your dad, there's an apocryphal story about your dad is, you said, ninth of 10?
Yeah, he's 9 of 10 kids.
And he was the one who didn't inherit.
Grandpa helped son number 1, 2, son-in-law number 3, got down to my dad at number 9 and said, we have enough farms, just work with your brothers. So he never had his own farm, and had he had his farm, I'm the oldest son, I'd be a farmer in Pennsylvania today. And instead of cow chips, it became computer chips, and history was made.
You've practiced that line before.
Indeed,
I can tell. Just once.
But it's also, as I was indicating, it's such a, we are so blessed, right? And I'll just say, I'm reminded of that, and I was telling Rolf the story. We had a family reunion. This is a decade and a half or so, 15 years or so ago. Several of my uncles have passed away now. But I'm sitting around this table with my dad and all 9 of his brothers and brothers-in-law. And I look around the table, not one of them has all of their fingers. So anytime a bit of arrogance or ego seems to creep into me, I just put my hands up and look at my 10 digits and I say, we did okay, and so did you.
Okay. Do you get any good tech support requests when you come home at Christmas?
Oh yeah, the automated milking systems and making sure Wi-Fi's out in the barn, all that kind of stuff. It's good.
Okay.
It's good.
So I don't think we need to remind people too much about VMware. Virtualization software innovator, one of the most important companies of the last 10 years inside any data center. One of the best startup tech deals of all time for EMC. Tell me, before you even got there, let's talk a little bit about Intel and your days there and what you learned at the feet of guys like Andy Grove.
Yeah.
And the meetings you got to sit in with Andy and Bill Gates. And
yeah, no, it was really, I was fortunate enough to interact with really the legends of the industry. And obviously at Intel, it was Andy, it was Gordon Moore, it was Bob Noyce. I mean, these were the intellectual leaders, right, of Silicon Valley. And it was just stunning that I got to interact with them. My office was close to Bob Noyce, so I'd sort of walk out the door, sort of time it with when he was walking out the door at night. Hey, Bob, how's it going? And, this is the inventor of the integrated circuit. And he was just the nicest guy on earth. Gordon Moore has to be the nicest billionaire who's ever walked the face of the earth. He just had, a deep philanthropic, heart as well. And Andy Grove was probably the most iconic of all of the 3 of them. And he was the most data-driven, intellectually honest person that, I've ever interacted with. Just wicked smart. But intellectual honesty, we're going to do the right thing, right, that the data causes us to do. Whenever I went into a meeting with Bill Gates, you always knew that he was the smartest guy in the room. You just didn't know what his agenda was, right? And you just knew that there was something else going on. With Andy, there was no agenda. It was get to the right answer. And like I was mentioning, Rolf, one meeting I was in, there was
those two kind of.
Oh yeah, this was
like
the picture of the Rams running and butting heads. That was Andy and Bill. You all have this false view of Wintel as some romantic, wonderful partnership. This was an intellectual battle, right, of titans at the time, and who was going to be the biggest dog leading the industry at that phase in time. There was no partnership here. This was raw competition of 2 enormous intellects.
Gates had his own little Khrushchev moment.
Yeah, he was, one meeting I remember, it was myself and Andy with Moritz and Gates, Paul Moritz, the former CEO here. So as I described it, it was Mr. Win and Mr. Tell when we got together at EMC and Intel, because Paul was, the Windows guy for many years, and he and I had done many partnerships and deals, and Mr. Intel, so Win and Tell. But this one meeting with Gates, he was so upset with us at Intel, just furious. He takes his shoe off and he's banging on the table in front of Andy. And I was just blown away by this. That it was so, some of you are laughing. You can imagine Bill doing this. A lot of emotion and passion in the guy. But then as we were coming back from that
This was over He wanted access to your chip, and you weren't giving him access to it.
Well, it was a layer of software that Intel was working on that really
Okay.
pissed Microsoft off. And so,
As it does, yeah.
right? And this we do silicon, he does software, and the fact that we were doing software really pissed him off at the time, as only Bill could be really pissed off. But as we walked away from this meeting, I just commented on how calm Andy was after this meeting, and just intellectually, continuing to drive forward. And Andy said something to me that night that I didn't really understand the significance of it until years later. And he says, I've looked in the face of dictators before. And he had looked in the face of Hitler when he had left Hungary, right, as a boy. And that was the kind of intellectual resolve and clarity and strength of the man. So, when he passed away in April of last year, it was a very sad day for many of us who had interacted, with what I think was one of the greatest, intellectual leaders of the technological era.
I don't want to go there, but I kind of want to go there. I'd be curious what he'd think about the current administration.
Anyway, Two weeks after the inauguration, I was in a meeting with a bunch of our folks, and obviously the flurry of executive orders coming out. So 2 weeks after the inauguration, I'm going to do a math test on you, and I asked the team of leaders that I was with. I said, "What's significant about 206?" Okay, think, everybody. What's significant about 206? And I said, the number of weeks left to go in this administration. And that's not okay, now that you got it, okay, you did the math. It's not a political statement. It's just like we're in for an interesting ride. I think there's going to be good things about the administration for business, tax reform, et cetera, right? Trade and other implications, right? And some of the things going on. It's going to be an interesting ride, and we're all going to have to, go through here and run a good business, despite what could be some pretty turbulent waters in different domains.
Just to take this tangent for a second, how are you preparing for it?
Well, part of it is being careful. Right, I'll say, and one of my views is, my job as CEO is I am not here to bring about social change. I'm here to run a business, and my role as CEO is to be the leader of that business. And if it's not a business relevant topic, I shouldn't opine, right? And I chose not to speak or sign the amicus brief, for instance, of the executive order on immigration. Why? I had a couple of people that were affected by it, but in a company of 20,000, a couple of people, that's not a business significant or impactful thing, right? Again, I didn't like it, but that's not my job as CEO. I'm going to speak and take actions where it is meaningful impact to our business, and I think that's our job. We're not here as political leaders; we're here as business leaders.
Okay. One thing I want to jump into, because we have a big audience full of startups and investors, and I'll throw a number at you, $8 billion. It's the amount of cash you have on your balance sheet.
Yes. I like that number.
Want it?
We're working on making that a bigger number.
Are you going to work on making it a smaller number, using it to buy some of these companies out here?
Potentially.
What are you on the lookout for?
Yeah, we've, and I've described for a while that, we have 5 areas that we would see acquisitions in: cloud, mobility, security, networking, and management. Those are the those are the 5 domains, and those are pretty broad. We're an enterprise company. I wasn't born with the consumer gene. We're going to stay as an enterprise company, so it's going to be, enterprise software companies that help accelerate our overall cloud, hybrid cloud, end user computing strategy, and companies target in one of those 5 areas. And we will continue to be an acquirer, and we're pretty good at it.
Startups right now, a lot of people have been saying, maybe less so in the last year, but 2014, 2015, beginning of 2016, they were looking awfully expensive. For you, for VMware, as you're looking at startups, are things too expensive today?
Well, they're not as.
And how do you measure that?
Yeah, and obviously you look at all of the normal metrics when you measure expense. Value to revenue ratios. Are pretty good indicators. Growth rate implications. Loss rates, time to break even. Cash the different cash metrics. So, pretty much all of the standard metrics that we would look at. And, nothing's expensive if you can build a business case that gives you a cash-on-cash return or a reasonable, multiple on that over some period of time.
Talk about Nicira in that sense, because you paid $1.2 billion for $10 million of revenue, Jamie? Was it $10 million?
It was less than 10. Right,
less than 10.
Literally, it was a crazy multiple, right? How many of you would pay $1.2 billion for a company that was well below 10 million in revenue? That was just stupid, kind of nuts.
But you're buying, in that case, you're buying IP.
Oh, IP, the team, as well. We'll dig on that one a little bit more. But in Q4 we announced that we crossed the $1 billion run rate, right? And how many of you would spend $1.2 billion for a company that's 4.5 years later crossing a $1 billion revenue run rate? Man, we're genius. We're good. Right, but at the time when it's $5-ish million of revenue at one point, you're nuts, you're crazy. Well, what's the matter with you, right? And obviously we built a business case. We believe that we could make this a new platform for the industry. And I think of, when you think about VMware, you say, hey, vSphere, ESX, a franchise product, right? Just a product that you're building an industry and an entirely company on. NSX is my second franchise product. I mean, this is something more significant than ESX and vSphere. That's the vision that we had in mind, right? We were convinced that we could bring about the first architectural revolution in the networking industry in 2.5 decades. And that's the passion that drove us to do that crazy multiple, and it's paid out.
Is that how you beat, it was a competitive deal. I think you were competing with Cisco on it.
Yeah.
Is that, you just paid more than they were going to pay?
Yeah, this is going to be one of those stories that'll go down. And, I think, it's working out well for us, but it'll be one of those stories that the annals of Silicon Valley, right, will record because, Cisco was definitely competing for us. Chambers had a mandate from his board to go do the Nicira acquisition. And, John's lifelong friend, Joe Tucci, EMC and VMware walked away with that company that he had a mandate and $50 billion. I have, a lot of cash in they have a lot more. Right, and a mandate to go get it done, and we walked away with the deal. That's pretty stunning, right, that we could go get that deal finished at the time. And part of the reason is that the team, right, the core innovators, Martin Casado, the guy who invented SDN and virtual networking, he wanted to come to a software company that had a culture like ours. That's where he wanted his company. One of the key rules of doing any acquisition is, you're looking at this hot startup company. They, they want to make money, they want to be successful, but what they want to do is execute their mission. They have built a company in passion and momentum, and if becoming part of our company accelerates the execution of their mission, and they see how we're going to help them accomplish that mission, they want to be part of our team. Right, because now, hey, it's not this idea of I'm giving up my IPO or anything like that. No, we're going to make you more successful by helping you and giving you more resources and capacity to execute your mission. And that's why Martin and the Nicira team wanted to become part of VMware. They didn't want to be, rolled up into that big Cisco hardware entity. And, it's just worked out perfectly. And, we still have, I think, another decade or two to go in the network virtualization agenda that we have. And I think this is going to be a huge business for us, an entirely restructuring of every aspect of networking in the industry. We're pretty thrilled.
What's a company you've passed on recently and why?
Boy, that's a dangerous question. Let me think about it.
I want names. Give me names.
No, I'm not going to. There certainly was a couple of, I'll say, mobile cloud SaaS security-related companies that we ended up not doing, and we passed on it without giving you specific names. Clearly, high multiples, right? And if you're going to look at something with high multiples, you better have high confidence that you can really go create a pretty big play with it. And, I think the business case was there, but it wasn't compellingly there. So the board was sort of asking some of those hard questions of us. Also, I do think that overall the security space is probably going to go through a phase of consolidation in the future. There's just too many security companies. There's just too much hype in the space. And even though we've had a meteoric rise in the security spend, if you look at an IT shop, they're left to put together 50, 80, 90 different point products to deliver a security solution. Can't be done. And then you're sort of left now against all those companies. Are they patched? Are they upgraded? Are they up to date? Are they integrated? You got the policy managers in place. Almost all the security attacks that have occurred are results of very basic things, right? Basic phishing attack that you didn't have good, administration, software updates. I mean, things that are pretty basic. And in that environment, I think the security industry is likely to go through a pretty big consolidation phase as we go forward. For those security companies in the audience, I say, get big, get out, or, fairly quickly would be my clean advice to you, because I think you have a couple more years and then things are going to change in a big way. So because of that sort of, I'll say, bigger strategic thesis, we ended up passing on a couple of companies in that space.
How do you see yourselves playing there?
Our view is that, we think that we need to do three things going forward in the security space. Number one is, my job is not to deliver infrastructure in the future, it is to deliver secure infrastructure, where lots of the baseline capabilities of security are built into our products and the platform that we deliver. And that's some of the strongest use cases for NSX that we were just talking about. We just introduced, for instance, encrypted volume stores as a native capability of vSphere. So data at rest, we're just going to encrypt all of it. You're going to have to turn it off, right, to not have, encrypted data at rest. We're integrating single sign-on, multi-factor, right, in the common way into our platform, micro-segmentation, secure network, all of those things we're just going to build in, right? And it's going to eliminate a whole lot of companies that are doing those products. We're just going to build it in. So number one is secure infrastructure. Two is do deep integration with key platform technology players. Get all the management, the policy, service chaining, all of those kind of things. Just make that sort of work so that fumble fingers don't eliminate security aspects of the infrastructure, and then enable secure hygiene. Okay. We just have to raise the waterline standard. We're involved in a number of the cybersecurity bills and other things like that, that I think really, there almost has to be an expected level of security for any business that has any credential or you're doing relationship with. It really is, I think, a crisis waiting to happen.
You have a VC fund too.
Yeah.
What do you like to do? What are you looking for there? What do you like to do with your VC fund? How do you deploy it?
Yeah, and we're not a big VC fund.
How much capital does it have?
We don't limit it. It's sort of average 50th million per year that we've put into it. So it's not a not a big fund. We probably do, 10, 12 investments per year.
Series A type investments, or
anything from Series A, B, kind of investments. A few very seed investments. But what we try to do is use it pretty strategically, right? In areas. 3, 4 companies in this space. Let's go invest in 1 or 2 of them. We think it could be a future M&A activity for us. A company that we think we might build a core partnership with going forward, and it's sort of like training wheels for a potential acquisition down the road, because we're getting to know them, getting to know the founders, the leaders. An important aspect about successful acquisitions and integration is cultural fit, right? And that's hard to do, right? In the heat of a deal, it's hard to assess cultural fit, right? And that just takes some time and relationship building, like you're talking about that, without that kind of relationship over a period of time, is it going to work, right? Because, most deals, fail because of integration issues around leadership and mission, right, for it. So we use it there. But we also, because of being part of Dell Technologies, we get the benefit of Silver Lake, Dell Technologies, and MSD Ventures. So I have a lot bigger fan out in the industry, right? And every once in a while, they'll funnel one of those other entities will funnel a deal our way as well. So I probably get the equivalent of $1 billion venture fund, even though I'm a tiny little company, or venture fund inside of our entity.
You mentioned leadership a second
ago. And I know you had
ago.
Dan Doctor on stage yesterday, or from the Dell Venture side.
You mentioned leadership. Leaders who, a great way to talk about leadership is how leaders confront challenges. For VMware, one of the biggest ones is Amazon Web Services, I think. A lot of these workloads that were inside your corporate data center are now going to a public cloud where they're not going to use, or they weren't going to use your software, right? What do you do? How are you, first off, I guess, how are you solving that problem with, you announced a deal with Amazon, right? Maybe tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, it was an interesting process, and obviously our cloud journey was not the, we didn't take the shortest route to get to the place that we're in today. We're in a very good place. Sometimes life takes you on more circuitous paths to get there, and our cloud strategy had a few twists and turns. We tried to build a joint venture.
I'm going to ask you about that next. So
yeah, right, but a few things, and where we got to late last year. Or late 15 was, the public clouds were exceeding everybody's expectation, growing faster, right? Amazon said, hey, maybe 30% growth, post 60%. I mean, it's just growing faster, the industry overall. Customers, 2 years ago, customers said public cloud. Now they're saying public cloud, of course, right? And now, building new apps and workloads, so the market changed pretty quickly. And then we said, hey, we have to go build fundamental differentiated relationships with one or more of the public clouds. And we looked at Amazon, Azure, Google, and Microsoft, went through a thorough process of what it would be to have a meaningful and deep business partnership. And out of that came IBM and Amazon as our two pillar partners, as I describe it. And a lot of angst, right? I think we had the last and final decision meeting on doing the Amazon partnership 7 times, right? That's we executed that well. Only 7. Today we're going to decide, right?
This is why this is
right. Only 7 more times did we go through it, and like 3 more board reviews and so on. It was a pretty tough decision.
And I want to read you a couple of quotes, and then get you to talk about that tough decision. Yeah. This is in 2013. You were at your partner conference, and you said, if a workload goes to Amazon, you lose, and we have lost forever.
Yep, I said
that to your partners.
Yep.
Your COO said at the time, I look at this audience, and I look at VMware and the brand reputation we have in the enterprise, and I find it really hard to believe that we cannot collectively beat a company that sells books.
Yeah, he did say that.
They kicked your ass,
yeah.
Right? Or they beat you. They won. I mean, how did you deal with sort of walking that back and making the strategic decision to change? And we have the sort of the frenemy relationship, as my friend out here, Alex from Scale Venture, like to put it.
Yeah, and it was a very tough process to get to that point. But one of the great things that you do in life is admit when your strategy's not working and make adjustments to make it work. Most startup companies, the business that ends up succeeding for successful startup companies is the 4th business plan, right? I think on average, right? You're going to make those twists and turns as you go forward. Corporations have to do it as well. You got to put your pride away, right? And you say, oh, I thought we were on a good path. It might have been a bad path because of things. You might not have executed it well. It might have been a great path, but you didn't execute it well. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you get there, and then you make good pragmatic decisions. And what we did is we went and looked at those 4 relationships, and Amazon and Microsoft, in particular, but the Amazon discussion was one that had occurred episodically, right, over 7 years, right? Moritz had done it. We had a lightweight engagement early in my tenure, so it was sort of the 3rd time, that my Amazon and Andy Jassy, had engaged with VMware, and we really committed that we had to get to a better answer, because as successful as Amazon was being, right? This was Andy's logic. Andy Jassy, CEO of AWS. His logic was as successful as they were being and capturing new workloads, moving workloads was hard. His number 1 competitive challenge was Microsoft and positioning of a hybrid cloud on and off premise, right? And that's their biggest direct competitor. And our challenge of our customers are building new apps and taking advantage of Amazon at scale. It is this global presence. So we created a unique and differentiated offering. All of VMware, a new bare metal. They have hundreds of engineers building this. We have hundreds of engineers. So we came out with a new answer that neither one of us thought possible before. And that answer, this seamless integration of the best of private with the best of public, right? We think is going to be a compelling service in the market. We're about to go alpha with that in the next couple of weeks and goes GA in the middle of the year. We had what we call the Lighthouse program, which has about 25, think of them as alpha customers. We're about to go live with those first alpha customers. And we had almost 1,000 nominations for the 25 alpha slots. Wow, this has a lot of excitement from the industry. So we're pretty thrilled.
Did you have a lot of holdouts internally, strategically said, we can't do this. We can't work with this company.
That's why we had 7 times we had the last meeting, right?
How did you convince them? Just as a lesson for startups, how, as a leader, do you get people on board with, turning the battleship 180 degrees?
And a lot of it is, at the end of the day, often, and you have this deep sense of what the right answer is. You know what the right answer is, but getting the right answer versus getting your team to the right answer, right? That's leadership, right? How can you tell a leader? People are behind them, right? And if your team doesn't come with you, you're on a walk in the woods, baby. Right? You have to have your team come with you. And that's why, we went through the meetings, we had another board review, tackled some of the debates or issues yet. At the end of the day, you sort of have that gut decision where, this is the call. We're finally going to make it and go forward. Now, even in your reservations, I, as the CEO, right, I'm making this call, but you have to give a lot of time for the team to come along. And sometimes the fast decision that is the right one isn't the right decision yet, right? And that's an important aspect of leadership.
Good. So actually extrapolate a little bit for startups who are supposed to move fast and break things, we're told.
Yeah, well, if you move fast, break things, and don't bring your team with you, you're on a walk in the woods, right? Great leaders bring their team with them, right? And sometimes, by the way, that means, if somebody can't get on board, right, with your direction, you might need to replace them. That's an okay answer as well. But you need your team with you on the journey, particularly as a startup, right? When you're out, redefine the world in a certain category. That has to be a team effort.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the future. 5 years out, 10 years out, what impact will Amazon have? Other technologies that you're paying particular attention to that perhaps people aren't paying enough attention to, and they're going to be sorry that they weren't.
Yeah. Well, generally, we're thrilled with, so much of what we're doing now, as I think about it, is, we're building infrastructure that has this confluence of efforts coming together between mobile and internet and wireless and AI and big data that allows us to start doing things that were just inconceivable before, right? Tomorrow morning, instead of getting up at 6 a.m., your smart device wakes you up at 5 a.m. Last night you had a heart irregularity. It's already uploaded all of your bio data onto the cloud. It's already doing the analytics versus your DNA, right? It's already made the doctor appointment on your behalf. It's already, rerouted your self-driving car to take you there. It's moved your Starbucks appointment and it made it decaf because you are going to the heart doctor, by the way. Right? Nothing in that scenario is out of the realm of what we are going to do in the next decade, right? It really, the quality of life, and I'm 37 years in the industry. If you've used a personal computer, I helped create it. If you've ever connected on Wi-Fi, I helped create it. These are some of the seminal things, and we're just getting started, folks. The things that we are doing, right? Literally, we're going to touch every human on the planet and every modality of life, and we're going to improve the length and the quality of life experience for every human on the planet. And if that doesn't get you excited, right, go somewhere else, right? That isn't what Jamie wants, man. That's what we have this opportunity to do, and some of the AI, machine learning things, as crude and as ugly as those algorithms are, they're starting to produce some pretty compelling results.
Let's drill down on that a little bit. Hype versus reality in AI. What's hype? What's reality? And what's a really stunning? You've been around AI, artificial intelligence. I don't know. You were building microchips.
I had this great experience in 1986. I'm the chief architect of the 486. So this is 1986. And this is the era of thinking machines and Lisp and Prolog and some of those, early languages. I see a few smiles. This is good. You may not have any idea what I'm talking about. Sorry about that.
I'm not sure I do, but...
Yeah, anyway, some of the early languages. And by the way, most of the basics of the algorithms that we use today in machine learning were set at that period of time. Most of the basics, there have been a few breakthroughs, but for the most part, the algorithmic structures of AI were established 30 years ago, right? My marketing guy comes running into my office one day, right? And, I generally thought marketing guys were stupid and not particularly helpful at that phase of my career. And he comes running in my office and he says, we must make the 486 a great AI chip. 30 years ago. And what's happened in AI for 30 years? The data's gotten bigger, the cloud has gotten faster, the algorithms have incrementally improved, not dramatically, but now the data and the computational capacity, plus the telemetry that we're getting in real time, right, because of all these mobile devices that you're carrying around, is now allowing us to do interesting things against that environment. It really, I believe, is the, I'll say, the platform of most interest. And you combine that with things like lambdas and serverless and other things like that, the ability to have IoT. Today we have about a little bit over 8 billion human-connected smart devices, right? And we have about 4 billion, right, machine-connected smart devices, right? Over the next 10 years, we'll have 3x the number of machine-connected devices versus human-connected, up in the 25 billion device range. The data, the telemetry, the introspection, the control that emerges as a result, it's just going to blow our minds of what we're going to be able to do over our next decade.
So let's put this all together, and just back to my last question about what's being overhyped? I mean, I feel like we're all talking about AI. To your point, this is something we've been discussing for 30 years.
Yeah.
Where are people where have they lost the plot, and where are we actually seeing real innovation that's going to make a real big difference in the next 5 years and 10 years?
Yeah, I think some of the deep machine learning stuff, I mean, it's very cool, but we have no algorithmic and mathematical understanding of why it works. I think that will probably fall apart, right? In the, there are a lot of people now, convinced they should build special hardware and other things for it. I think that was probably going to fall apart until we get to a real algorithmic understanding of why it works. So I think that one's probably overhyped. I think we're coming out of some of the domains like blockchain and so on. I think that was way overhyped. Now we're actually starting to develop some real use cases for distributed ledger systems. So I think that one actually is going to come into, remember, you have the cycle of hype, the valley of despair, and then the plains of prosperity. I think we're soon going to enter the plains of prosperity on some of these new algorithmic domains. I think IoT is way overhyped. As excited about it as I am, right? I think it's way overhyped in a lot of domains, and we have to say, where's the real high-value use cases that are going to occur in that space for where there's high value, right? Sensor data, et cetera, that really enables, I'll say, meaningful new use cases. I mean, I'm just really not sure.
Putting a chip on a toaster is not really helping us, you mean, or?
Yeah. Putting smart light bulbs. I don't get it myself, but I think there are going to be so many useful applications that emerge that I sort of don't mind some of the hype in that space.
Okay. I want to give people a chance to ask questions. Are there any in the audience? I got plenty more here, but you guys are smarter than I am, so think of some questions if you've got a few, and raise your hand and shout it out. So we got one right here. Okay. So the question, I'll repeat the question if I heard it. You talked about culture as an important aspect when you're looking for an acquisition. What are the other factors that are at play?
Yeah, so clearly when we look at acquisition and that integration process, one is, we always say, I have to keep them, particularly if it's an early acquisition. Late stage acquisitions might be different, if it's large public companies that you're bringing in, right? But for early stage acquisitions and startup companies, like I said, can I enable them to be successful in their mission? Right? And that's something that, because you have to keep the founders and the passion of the founders fully at play as they come into the new entity. And if you don't enable that passion to keep going, they're going to leave. Right? And remember, in almost all these companies, if you lose the founders, the core team, et cetera, you've lost all the value.
And it's not just a matter of giving them stock and, you're not vesting for 4 years.
Yeah.
It's what is it?
It is their mission that you're enabling them to do. And then, usually we end up asking them to revest for a couple of years, right, to continue,
So
at
it
least
doesn't
2
hurt,
years.
but yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It's an expectation. If you really believe in your mission and you're not going to, revest your stock in our entity to keep going forward, then you're not really committed to your mission, right? You can build that logical flow, and you almost always get them there. And if not, hey, I know you're not going to be a cultural fit and see it through anyway, so I'm not going to waste my capital, right, on your company. It becomes a fairly tight, right, consistent, view of that logical relationship. So that's one. Can I accelerate their mission? Does their mission fit into our bigger strategy, right? And do you really get that fit? I always look for the leaders. I personally interview every one of them, right, that we're going to do and meet with them, and that's one of the cultural tests. As well, and then get very, very crisp around what you're bringing them in to accelerate and grow it faster. What are those things, right? And then be very maniacal about what they're going to be and make sure you protect them as well, because often acquisitions come in to the company, you build a business case, you tell them you're going to give them 100 people in sales, and then the first budget cycle comes around, you give them 20. Right? Why didn't you succeed, right? And it's like, well, you shot your own self in the foot. And like in the AirWatch acquisition, when we did that one, another big one, we committed to add almost 500 people to the AirWatch organization, right, in sales and so on. We added everyone that we committed to, despite the up and down in our budgets elsewhere. You have to be highly disciplined about protecting them. We ran a separate operating board for them as well, because all of a sudden you got some high-flying CEO who can make decisions in 6 seconds, right? He comes into the company, and you now tell him that some low-level paralegal, right, who's fresh out of school gets to tell him no. Right? Right? You know how long that's going to last, right? One of them is going to kill each other, right? And you can't create. You have to protect those kind of things to really enable them and have the infrastructure to make it work. And we've had tremendous success with our acquisition track record, just because we were really, really thoughtful about all these aspects. And it's better to say no for both parties than to have one of these factors inconsistent and then think, we'll make it up, we'll figure it out on the way, right? No.
What are your thoughts on the
Container trends.
Containers.
I mentioned
love this
Amazon.
topic.
Great. That's a great question. Amazon's one deflationary force for your business.
Yeah.
Containers is another problem for
Yeah, we
virtualization
really
software.
had, going back 2 years, we had sort of 3 major things that were, I'll say, hitting against us that we were having to navigate in. One was open source, OpenStack, right? Another was cloud, right? Was forces coming against us. And then the third, I'll just say, is the maturity of the underlying vSphere, right? Technology base and market. So those are the big things that we've been having to navigate through. Largely, we've navigated through OpenStack, right? It hasn't materialized as a big effect. What we've rolled out with our cross-cloud, IBM, Amazon partnerships, we're now, well on the other side. We have our new business areas, really gaining momentum. NSX, vSAN, AirWatch are growing. And the new challenge is containers, right, for it. And some would argue that, hey, the right way to run containers is to put it on a bare metal server. I don't need any of that V crap that you guys deliver, right, and just give me a bare metal server and I'll put my own Linux load on it. And, in many respects, that sounds pretty compelling. Now, when you get into operationalizing an environment, though, you have to worry about managing it. You have to worry about security. How do I network those containers together anyway? You still need networking and, the load balancing and firewalls. And you get back to a whole bunch of infrastructure stuff. And then those cool DevOps kind of guys that had all these great new ideas on containers, they're generally pretty lazy. Right? Because then it gets to the hard work of operationalizing their cool new app. Right? Do they want to be carrying the beepers and making sure the infrastructure is solid? No, they want to keep innovating going forward, right? IT, you take care of that crap, right? And you take care of the operation stuff. I'm a cool, hot developer, right? And how you bring those two worlds together, right, is very much in the center of that is our container strategy. for which we're saying containers are cool for new app development, for lifecycle management, for deployment purposes. That is just great. We love it, right? It's maybe the most significant technological breakthrough in application development acceleration since Java and Java machines, right? I'll just argue that, that it's that important. But you still have to deal with the infrastructure-related items.
So you're hoping this one will remain sort of I don't want to say an infant technology, but something that requires management and will allow you guys.
Well, the infrastructure it runs on needs to be managed. It needs to be networked. It needs to be secured. And almost all container cool new apps in the enterprise space end up being some ugly composite of old stuff and new stuff, right? It's not like you're going to go refactor 20 years of stuff overnight and dump it all into all scale-out, stateless, resilient containers. That's a lot of work, right? A lot of the container stuff is cool new front ends, different app logic that need to reach into existing stuff. So you need to operationalize that across a consistent framework.
Okay.
And that's what we can do, right? We can really solve, I'll say, enable the new cool containerized stuff, but also the existing apps against a common operational model into the future, and bring a lot of our new technologies more natively into those container worlds. And we're just, we announced NSX integration into native containers with Kubernetes, Docker, and Pivotal Cloud Foundry. Don't need the rest of the VMware stack. NSX is there as your common networking layer. We announced our management tools. Hey, we're going to have native container, integration with Kubernetes, and we're going to embrace those as well. Now, obviously, I'm trying to pull as much of our existing stuff forward because that's where I make the boatload of my money, but I have to be relevant in those spaces even if I don't have it on a vSphere base.
Okay. We had a few more. I saw a few hands go up. Back there.
Well,
question is China, business in China.
And, I think, there's a lot of, if I go back to the Trump question that we touched on before, I think the trade implications of this administration, are probably, to me, the most concerning. 50% of my business is Americas, 50% is international. And so, I think there's real risk here. Right, you have a very strong leader in Xi, right, who probably compared to Deng or Mao is the strongest leader in China's history, right, and you have a very aggressive Trump, and I'm not sure those things are going to be compatible. So I think some of the China trade issues, could be, the most impacted. I mean, we'll figure it out with respect to Europe, and maybe Russia becomes buddies again, and I don't expect anything, too horrific in the Middle East, but I think China is the one that does concern me in this phase of the international landscape that we're going through. I think that means the Chinese probably, become more domestic focused around their technologies in that respect. Not necessarily good for us as an industry, right? The second largest economy in the world, right? Sort of viewing our actions to become more, right? U.S. centric, and they'll respond by becoming more Chinese centric. So this to me is the one that is most concerning of all of the international relationships over the next couple of years. That said, hey, we're investing. My business there is good. Dell's business there is very good. So I get to ride a little bit of their coattails. I announced a partnership, a joint venture with the company Shugan, right? Last year, I have to put Chinese characters in front of my product names because there's a third of the economy in China is run by state-owned enterprises. So, and they're just not going to buy foreign technology. So you better find ways, right? If you want to reach a third of the market, right, you better find ways to position yourself with the right Chinese partnerships and players. Huawei is probably the scariest company in the entire landscape of technology today, right? Extraordinarily aggressive and powerful in a world sense. So, you have to wrestle with some pretty hard problems when you think about China.
I think that we're getting the buzzer. Thanks so much, Pat.
And,
Oh, you have one other thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say very quickly, and unfortunately, you know, I have to run out of here pretty quickly today. We were named one of the Fortune 100 best places to work. I'm having a celebration on my campus this afternoon. Yeah, we're excited about that. And as you guys are working, and lots of you are startup and venture companies that you are, you know, it isn't just to have a great idea, but I would encourage you to have a passion to build a great company. You know, a company that you will be proud of in the values, the cultures, the communities that you're part of. And if you feel that you're creating not just a great new product, but a great new company as well, you know, you will, one, be more successful, I believe, and two, you're going to sleep a whole lot better at night. So best wishes to all of you. Thank you.